Okay, well, let's jump in. All right, Stacey, take it away.
Theme song?
Yep.
Okay, guys, you have to, Lauren and Andy, you have two choices. Either you two lead it, and I'm picturing like a jazzy scat theme song, or I'm just going to steal from Phil Collins. It's your choice.
I guess I'm going to lean towards Phil Collins, maybe. What do we...
Yeah.
That's a phrase I've never said, by the way, in my entire life. I just want to say.
Can you see me? Can you see me running a show? Can you see me running a show? Because I'm a showrunner. The showrunner show.
Horrible.
Guys, I swear. These are so much better.
I'm
These
realizing you had
really
one good theme. You had one good theme, and it's just been like scraping the barrel ever since then. Maybe
steady decline ever since. Yeah.
Our producer was like, I didn't even have to auto-tune you. You were in pitch. I was like, yeah, I went to school for musical theater. This one, he's going to be like, what do I even do?
Oh, he's just like, edit.
Auto-tune, just like super heavy auto-tune.
Yes,
Select all, delete. Welcome to the Showrunner Show, where every week we demystify some aspect of the job of showrunning for anyone who works in TV, who wants to work in TV, or just wants to see how it's all made. This week, we'll be talking again with Lauren Mackenzie and Andrew Gettens, who we love, who are friends of the show, friends of the pod. And
we can't do that. Don't do the we're awesome thing again. I can't handle it.
Yeah. Okay.
We listened last week. Yeah.
Yeah. You can listen to our intro from last week. This week's topic we'd like to talk about is the ups and downs of being a writing duo. This is something Drew and I'll tell a brief story. Like Drew and I, we came up together, obviously, and we have been tied at the hip in every meeting, everything for all these years. And, Drew and I actually copied the Coen brothers. Like we looked at, we copied their playbook. Like Joel went to NYU, Ethan, studied other things, and then they kind of met together and they divided their credits the same way we did. Like we followed their playbook. And then we, when we were in Santa Fe, we were having dinner with Michael Shannon and Taylor Kitsch, because we were shooting Waco, and Joel Cohen and Frances McDormand.
Franny McDormand.
Yeah, it was her birthday, and they were having dinner there, and Michael Shannon's like, "Oh, I know her. You want to meet them?" And we're like, "Oh my God, yes!" And we went over there, and Frances McDormand said, "Oh, is that Taylor Kitsch? Like, I gave him the worst career advice ever, 20 years ago. I told him never to do press or no one will respect you." She's like, "I need to go over there and apologize." So we keep Joel company. And so Drew and I sat with Joel Cohen and basically had an hour-long conversation, how is it working as a duo? How do you guys do it? How do you divide the work? And it was, I don't know, such an interesting conversation. We've never actually discussed it. We've worked, Drew and I are a duo, Stacey's, part of our trio. And then you guys are a husband-wife duo. How did you guys start doing this?
Andy and I started out as individual writers with the intent of never writing together. Because anytime someone knew that we were dating, but we were both writers, they would always say, well, definitely don't write together because that'll end the relationship. And we were like, absolutely, we will never do that. But then my brother was best man in a wedding. And I have a younger brother who's very talented in sports is more his thing. Writing is not. And so a couple weeks before the wedding, he called in a panic and was like, as best man, I have to give a speech for this wedding and I have no idea how to write a best man speech. Can you write this speech for me? And I said, of course, I'm your sister, family. That's what you do. You help each other out. But at the time, I was a writer's assistant for David Kelly and I was really busy. And so I turned to my then boyfriend at the time, Andy, and I said, Andy, I'm going to need you to write this best man speech for my brother.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know any of these people.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
It was before the days of ChatGPT where you could just best man speech, plug in some names. Okay, so go on.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, don't let that stop you. So he wrote a speech and he gave it to me to take a look at. And I made tweaks to it. Yeah, I took a pass. Yeah, we went kind of back and forth. It was the first thing we ever collaborated on, and then I sent it off to my brother. The wedding went well. The speech went great, and a couple days after the wedding, we got a phone call from his friend that was like, "Oh my God, Lomac, like great speech. That was so good." Scott confessed like that he didn't write it. And then he said, "Listen, my cousin's wedding is coming up in a couple of months. Could you just take a look at what and tell me if it's any good?" So we were like, "All right, sure, fine, send it our way." And so Andy and I, it's
That kept
kind of
happening.
spiraled out of yeah, it kind of spiraled out of control. And for like 2.5, almost 3 months, we just wrote wedding speeches for people all over the country for weddings we
Who
never
we knew
attended.
less and less.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Like how
There's
many
Be a real
speeches?
business in this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
except we did not get paid a cent for any of it. So everyone's like, "What a great business idea!" And we're like, "Fuck yeah, that was." We didn't get any money at all for that.
no.
People always say too, they're like, "Oh, that sounds like a rom-com setup." Except in the rom-com, you guys hate each other at the beginning. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. that
I
does.
love that. That's so good.
Yeah. So that's how we started. And what we realized after like 3 months is we're like, oh, well, writing together was really fun. Like it's so much more fun than just writing on our own. And we felt like the work we were producing was great. And we thought, listen, I know everyone says this is going to doom our relationship, but like, let's just try it. Like, let's just see what it's like to kind of write together. And then we wrote our first spec script, and that did unbelievable for us. Like it opened a ton of doors. Everyone was like, "I love this script. I love this script." We got meeting after meeting after meeting. People wanted to make it. So we were like, well, this seemed to be the key to unlock like our best work. And then from then on, we just started writing together.
But it is a daunting process because you're like, you're already in a relationship with somebody, which is like a fair amount of eggs in a basket, and you're like, "Fuck it, let's put some more eggs in here, more eggs." So it doesn't come without risks, because it's not like you're ever like, "Oh, this writing team, they used to be married, now they're divorced, but the writing relationship is still excellent."
That doesn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Andy
They're still working on all cylinders.
Andy always jokes that the decision to write together was a bigger decision than the decision to get married, because he was like,
That's for real.
Yeah, well, when we sat down and said, like, should we write together? We really talked about, like, what that would mean. Like, this means you're going to write together for the rest of your lives. Like, not like marriage. Yeah.
Marriage in like an afternoon. You know what I mean? Like, but you're telling me I got to write my own sample now? Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, like if you become known as a duo, so you write a script with another person and people read it, it gets passed on, it gets you a career. You are then considered like by like Writers Guild, you can get into the Writers Guild as a duo. And you're essentially then considered one person. You're treated as one individual. So you go into a writer's room together, but you're paid one salary as if you're one person, not two. And you're, residual, like everything. It's always as the duo until, I don't know if you go through some sort of process, but that's, Drew and I realize like in a lot of these writing rooms, we're making less, financially less money than anyone else in the room because we're half a person each, you know what I mean? And it's kind of funny as you start coming up, you start going like, wait, but we're each bringing a lot of experience to this. We're each bringing problem solving. We're each spitballing, ideas separately and together. Like we're not doing the work, like two people working tirelessly together can do the work of 5 people, not one. You know what I mean? Like, and that's been our experience. And we've seen that with you guys. Like you guys, do the work of 5 people between the two of you. How's your experience been with this? Has it been frustrating? That side, the business side of it, has that been frustrating? Has that not really?
It's a great question. There's a lot to say. I'm always curious. When you guys are brothers, we're married. There's like a familial element to that stretches beyond the professional relationship. And I'm always curious, like there's a lot of reasons early on to get into a partnership, right? Like, because I think you can push each other. You can oftentimes, if you work well together, create better material. You're doubling your contacts. You're offering more value, to your point, John, which is, at the beginning valuable in trying to break in. I'm speaking mostly as like a writer's room. You're getting a deal, right? When you're getting both Lauren and I for one, but it's interesting. I think it's something you really want to think super seriously about before you do enter that compact. I mean, there's obviously ways to do it like on a more piecemeal basis. If you're just going to write a feature together, you're going to direct, there's ways to do it where you're not sort of tied together. But in a version where you're trying to break into television and work your way up to showrunner or something like that as a team, it's an incredibly serious decision, because you're going to be like, in a way, that other person is going to be like one of the most important figures in your life in so many ways for the foreseeable future, and you have to it's hard to think that far ahead when you're just trying to break in, but it is an incredibly important decision. And I'm sure you guys know too, like we know teams that are like teams that I'm sure wish they weren't, over many years, and they just don't really have the choice. Or oftentimes other teams too, if we've seen a lot of teams that have had to split apart because they just couldn't hack it together like any longer, be it financially or just the working relationship. So, it's a very serious thing to consider. But for Lauren and I, it's mostly awesome. I mean, we love it. There are definitely downsides that we can talk about too, but there's pretty amazing. This is a hard life and a hard career full of lots of slings and arrows, and to be able to do that with somebody all the time, I think is incredibly, I'm only speaking for myself, but helps me get through it, and helps me keep going, and helps me keep writing, and helps me, there's a lot of motivation and strength that come from not having to do it by yourself. I've always written with partners in screenwriting. Even before I wrote with Lauren, I wrote with a couple of other partners. I've always found it to be helpful to me in the process to create material that I felt like had different perspectives, that it was a little more polished, that also pushed me to write more, like all the things that it sort of provided, I always really valued. So I'm like a big proponent of collaboration in general.
Yeah.
And this is like the ultimate form of that.
I'm curious to know your workflow, because just you've had many different partnerships. Has your workflow always sort of been the same from partner to partner? Who's the person at the keyboard? Who's the person doing voice memos? Who does the first pass, the second pass? Has that always been the same, or has it changed kind of with each partnership?
It's changed with technology. Like when Andy and I first started, we would each write separately, and then you take a scene, I take a scene, and then we combine it and note each other's work or kind of swap it back and forth. But now, we write all of our outlines on Google Docs, because we can both write on the document at the same time. So we can actually be in the document together, which is fun because you're seeing the work expand, but also you can see your partner go up to something you've written and you just see delete, delete, delete. And you're like, hey, what are you doing?
Strike out.
And then there's a script program called Writer's Duet that we make use of, and that's a screenwriting program where you're in the script at the same time and can write at the exact same time.
That's like an alt to Final Draft?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I you guys don't have a trade out with Final Draft, do you?
No.
Have a what?
I trade out with Final Draft. I hate Final Draft. I think it's a terrible program for what it is. It's industry standard, but it's so glitchy and hard. It's just not great. And there's a lot of other programs. Writer's Duet is the one that we use, because you can truly just collaborate in real time on a script, which is amazing. And it formats everything exactly like Final Draft. So we don't even use Final Draft anymore unless we're on a show that requires it.
Well,
Wow.
as Drew and I came up, I'm pretty shy, in, what I mean? Outside of this, venue, I'm a pretty shy person, and Drew has a lot more kind of social courage than I do. And I found that aspect of the job, so much of that, I feel like, there's two things that I would say have really helped being part of a duo is before every meeting we would have with execs, before everything, on the way in, it was like clockwork. I turned to Drew and I'd be like, if I start freaking out, will you take over? And he'd be like, yeah, I gotcha. And it became, where I almost didn't even mean it anymore. It's just I just had to know Drew was there by my side and it would be okay, regardless of what happened. And another thing, like, it means more, you know, when it's with someone else. Like, just if it was by myself, I just feel like the ups and downs, like, if there was no one to share it with, like kind of who cares? You know what I mean? Where with Drew, like, there's these moments where it's like, oh my God, like, that was just, you know, the best moment. Like, who gets to tell mom? You know what I mean? Like, there's those moments, and then there's the, like, those moments that are like, that was crazy. Like, was it just me, or was that insane? Like, the craziest thing that ever, like, that either of us ever saw? Like, and it kind of stabilizes you in a way where, you know, you could feel like you're, like, you
100%.
know, huffing laughing gas, you know, in some of these meetings. But, like, with Drew there, it's like he can verify your reality check, you know.
It's kind of like in regular life, the best thing about going to a party is leaving the party and gossiping about it with your spouse. Like, I couldn't believe that. Do you see what she was wearing?
Well, it's so funny you say that, like, because I think the nature, it's so true. It's a really good point. Like, the nature of, I think many relationships, a lot of healthy relationships usually, right? Like, be them professional or personal, is, you know, you tend to try to balance each other out, right? Like, if one, like in a marriage, right? Even like, or a relationship, if one of the partners is really mad about something, the other one's like, oh, it's going to be okay. And vice versa, right? And so there is an element of regulation, I think, that comes with being in a partnership that's incredibly useful, right? Like, where one person's like, I'm going to send this fucking angry email, and the other one's like, count to 10, you know? And I think, and also because you are kind of representing someone outside yourself, I also think you oftentimes act with a little more prudence, if that makes sense, you know, because you know, you have to think about, you are essentially, everything you do, you are doing it on behalf of the other person as well, professionally. And so you have to think of it through that lens. And I think in a lot of ways, I think, you know, like, this will not surprise you. Like, I would be the one probably who would be more likely to, like, say something I probably shouldn't in a situation, not like necessarily like a mean thing or something like that, but just like share too much, for example, or maybe tell a story I shouldn't tell. And like having Lauren there, I think, is put some guardrails on us in a good way, like going through our career a little bit.
Yeah,
so,
I'm the Andy in this relationship. I'm 100% the Andy in this relationship. Like Allison, our, like, creative exec, describes us as, like, John's like the one side of the brain, like, maybe we should do this. Maybe we could try that. How about this? What about this? And Drew's like the other side of the brain. It's like, no, we shouldn't do that. No, that's a bad idea. That's a terrible. Like, no, let's stick to the plan. Like, you know, Drew, like, we're sort of like, you know, in ego or whatever, the, like, two sides of the.
Remember, Stuart used to describe us as John, he's the inside guy. Drew, he's the outside guy.
Drew's the one you send to the parties. John's the one you keep, like, locked in the attic, for, you know, on the keyboard. You know,
you also get to have like a total scapegoat, or like you get to be like, well, listen, it might be fine with me, but this guy's the bad guy. Like,
no,
you know,
we
you know,
do that all the time, Lauren. That is such a great point. Like, it's so helpful when sometimes you can just you can also buy yourself some time. You know, like, hey, you know, it's an interesting idea. We need to talk about it internally. It's just, you're not put on the spot and have to make a decision because you're just one person ever. And you can really use that to your advantage. It's true.
Oh, yeah. Drew, you know, I know certain things, like, Drew loves, like, when a car's driving, kicking up dust in the background. Drew loves that. Like, I know if I'm on set and there's that option, I'm like, do that thing. Drew loves it every time, you know, like, you know, you get to know each other's, the things each other loves and hates. Like, oh, Drew hates it when, you know, somebody's holding a cup of coffee and it's empty, because he can always tell, and it always makes him angry. So put water in, like, you know what I mean? Like, you can kind of, like, like, and I got to say, there's holes, you know, there's holes in what we all see. Like, we're all blind to certain things, I feel like.
Totally.
And there's things I would never notice that drive Drew crazy. And I know it drives Drew crazy. Other, like, you know, early in our career, there'd be things, you know, like, that, like, he wouldn't like. I'd be like, no, it's fine. And then 5 other people would say the exact same thing. And over time, And Drew's kind of unrelenting, so he'll keep bringing it up over and over until I'm like, oh, fine, you know.
Consistent.
No, but
Drew,
Yeah, consistent.
I feel you, Drew. I'm the same way. That's so funny. I'm the same way. I have certain things too that like Andy has just like given into at this point. Like I don't like writing characters who are tired on screen. I'm like, why is this character why do I as an audience want to watch this guy be mopey and tired? Like, give me some coffee.
I'm tired. He doesn't get to be tired. Yeah.
I love that.
It doesn't translate on screen to me. It just I find tired to be just the worst to watch on screen. And
I'm like, sometimes people are tired, but fine, nobody's tired anymore.
They're just angry.
I give up.
People don't get to be tired in our scripts. And the other thing is like I find that the amount of times that like it's in scripts that it's like the woman like character like tears up, starts crying. And not that I'm against people crying, but the amount of times that usually you see in a script, like the woman is just like a basket case crying. Like I'm always cutting out tears in our scripts.
Totally.
To the point where now, like Andy just knows, like, or he'll be like, can she just sniffle? Like he'll ask, like, can she? Like where can we push this?
I agree. Directorially, I'm always pushing against tears too, because I think my opinion is it's like it's not really sad to see someone cry, but what is sad is to see someone trying not to cry. Like
Exactly.
that's always really sad to me. It's like
I feel like we could have a whole separate podcast about our like pet peeves. Like my one of my biggest pet peeves is when in a drama the news comes on with the information you need to have for the character at that moment, when no one watches the fucking news ever anymore, and like it's like the newscast is on TV. It's like today at 11:30, this blah blah blah, like the exact information that our characters have to have at that moment.
If you want an
Didn't we
example
do
of
that in
that,
Waco Aftermath a lot?
Scene two of
Probably.
Waco Aftermath at that moment. Sorry for that.
Gary Nisner wipes away a tear.
But in our defense, that was 1994. They did watch the news.
Exactly. Exactly. I was going to say people watch news in the 90s.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's true.
But it's true. I think it's really fun also, like, this is more, I think, getting to write with a woman also is really nice. I feel like I have like a little bit of a cheat code also in being able to like have like a different perspective, but also like get to take chances that I might not get to take, sometimes we'll write a scene and Lauren will be like, no, like we can't, like that's like from a female perspective, we can't write that, but we get to try it because we have the cover of her being a woman in our group,
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And one of my most satisfying moments ever was we like wrote a scene on a pilot recently that Lauren was like, I don't think this works from a female perspective, but we tried it and all the women were like, Lauren, I know you wrote this scene because it's so true and so good. And I was like, yes.
I don't know about what you guys do, but normally Andy and I, like, we really don't tell people what we write. Like we don't say like I wrote this or he wrote that because I find sometimes people are always trying to figure out like who's the talented one and who's the hanger on. And it's just
I'm
not
the hanger on. I can say that.
Me too.
who's just writing coattails. So we really try not to say, and I will tell you, people guess wrong constantly. Like they
Interesting.
always think that I wrote something that I didn't, or vice versa. Always. It's usually wrong. But yeah, like Andy said, it's fun. Like I told him, I said, okay, we'll try that risky thing. And yes, he was right. Every exec, every woman on our producers and studio team were like, oh, Lauren, that was fantastic.
That's so funny.
But I also think it's really hard. Have you guys found like, you change, it's so easy you change as a person and as a writer throughout your career. And like, I'll just say like a good example, like right now is like, I think in the beginning of our career, maybe like I would have been somebody that was like, maybe wanted to do something weirder or more auteur, and Lauren, who had worked in scripted television more than me at that point, was like, no, like these are the rules and these are the situations and this is what works, right? But I actually think over time it's easy to become like, you work in TV a really long time and I'm like, oh, I know what works now, and just plug A into A and B into B, and we've done it a million times. And now I feel like things have shifted a little bit sometimes, and Lauren's like, no, like don't forget to like be different and weird, and how can we make this like push it, And I think that if I was writing by myself, I could easily see myself steering into a direction that was less cool or productive in that situation. Having somebody to balance you out, I think, can be really useful also.
I love that. I find that same with Drew is more willing to stand in the fire and push back in a way that like I can be, like insecure and like, you know what I mean? Like, and Drew's like, no, this is right. Like, this is good. This is good. Don't, let's push back on this thing. Drew has a ferocious spirit, that I find really, no, really, like he is stubborn in a way that I find really helpful because I, sometimes can be a little too eager to please, partners and stuff. Or I can be like, I can't do, you know what I mean? Like I can be sometimes more emotional also. So Drew is a nice stabilizer. He helps me not change, helps us not change stuff that shouldn't be changed and helps me like not do stupid things in an emotional state.
Yeah, I feel like I think Lauren's the closer in our relationship, kind of like I'm more inclined to be like slightly annoyed or something like that, maybe, or like I take much longer to like take a note, like we've gotten, obviously all of us take a lot of notes and usually there's something good behind them and we run into them, but I might need a little more time to process and get to that point, than Lauren some of the time. But I think that in instances where like there's real issues or problems, like Lauren is the one that like you would rather like that deals with that better, I think sometimes, like I also like I feel like I'm learning a lot. I'm definitely the John in this relationship.
Yeah.
Where like
yeah.
I would be more inclined to like at the end of the day be like, okay, well, I guess we'll do this, and Lauren would be like, no, this is the one we should take a stand on,
Yeah.
I bet if you guys took your Enneagram tests, have you ever done that? They're so fun. If you took your Enneagram tests,
yeah.
I bet you guys would match up. I have a question for you because there are so many different aspects to, there's pitching and then there's writing outlines and then there's writing drafts and then there's reading other writers' stuff and rewriting it. And then there's so many different aspects to it. Do you all participate equally in those things? Or is it like Lauren's the queen of pitches and Andy's the king of outlines? And
I think in the beginning, we mostly strove to be pretty equal in everything that we did. There's certainly things that we're stronger or not as strong at. Like, I just, for whatever, like, when we got into shortening, like Lauren's better at casting. She was an actress. She just has a better feel for it than I do. Like, I watch things and I certainly have like opinions and values that I attribute to those, but I find that I'm not always as good as those. Don't always end up translating as well to the person when the cut comes in, and I feel like Lauren has like an incredible feel for that. Lauren's also really good at like big picture stuff, like structure when it comes to, and she's able to hold a lot of those things in her mind, whereas I can be like much more focused on an individual scene than the whole. So there's definitely areas like we're strong and weak. I feel like I'm really good off the cuff, and Lauren's not always as good off the cuff, like in a pitch or something like that. I'll take like if there's questions at the end of a pitch, like I'm much better at like doing those on the fly than she is.
Yes, I like to like take my time and really like think about something, and Andy does not need that time to process. Like he's much faster at it to be able to and he's much faster at riffing. And like usually at the start of a room when you're doing like the big picture blue sky, Andy enjoys that a lot more than I do. I'm more details. I like structure. I like details. I like pitching into a scene, into something structured.
Right.
So yeah.
And as you get busier, like now, I think we divide and conquer more than we did before. You just have to as a necessity when you actually start show running. Like then it becomes a superpower. Yeah. But it is like you have to have a lot of trust. And I think there's also, I'm sure they're probably for you guys too, it's like there's a learning curve too to like what you can do on your own or what you should do on your own versus what needs consultation sometimes, and how to use that superpower best.
And I think just to answer your question specifically, Stacey, like in terms of pitching, Andy, it's a benefit to have a team member in a pitch because you can kind of go back and forth. You get to tell the story and you're not just like one person talking for 20 minutes. And then also, I don't know if you guys do this, John and Drew, but we even will write our like off the cuff remarks, like, you know, like little aside jokes that we'll put into a pitch that sound like we just came up with it, but it's not. It's all scripted, but we kind of play
Amazing.
back and forth. And it kind of keeps things light and I think it's very effective. So we do that together, pitching outlines. Like I said, we do on Google Docs and that, and we are very outline heavy, Andy and I. Like we like a long outline,
as you guys know.
Yeah, which I love. I absolutely love.
Well, we also just like for our own writing, really, if we're talking about a scene and then we go work on it, it's better that Andy and I know exactly what the other one's doing. Otherwise, it becomes chaos if it's a little too loose.
Yeah, breaking things in more detail before we go off and write individually, we found very early on, we're like, oh, this makes it way, way better. So you don't come back with seeing the other person's like, wait, we didn't talk about this at all. And I also think that, like, pitching wise, you know, you all have good and bad days, right? You get in there sometimes and you're doing great and sometimes you're not. And there's something nice where, like, I'm pitching and I'm like, oh, I missed that line. I forgot to say that thing. I get tripped up for a second, but I'm only talking at any given moment for 1/20th of the pitch. And then Lauren jumps in and I have the ability to like reset. And I also have the ability sometimes to gain strength because she might be crushing it. And then she's doing great. And I come back and I'm like, okay, yeah, all right, I'm back in, you know, like I don't feel like the whole thing gets lost sometimes. Whereas by yourself, you can sort of, you're like, well, this isn't going well, you know, in your head as you're pitching.
How do you guys do it?
I mean, it's so similar to what you guys are saying. Like I typically like really need that outline to go into a pitch and really want some structure and kind of know what we're going to say. And John really likes to riff and keep it conversational, and any opportunity within the pitch to kind of veer off of the plan, John will jump on it right away. And it's always, you know, that's a good thing. It's like we say now, like, we need the outline in case it's just like blinking eyes on the other side of the table and they're not asking any questions and there's no opportunity to kind of convert into a conversation, then we need it, you know. But the sooner kind of, you know, John's able to veer off is usually a good thing. And so we kind of have that, you know, push and pull between us, and, you know, John can riff and, you know, talk about anything he wants, and then I'm there to kind of bring it back, you know, to the plan to make sure we kind of touch on everything.
Yeah, I sort of like have the tendency to grab the wheel and steer us off the road, and then shoot him a look like, "Oh my God, I don't know where we are." And then
where are we?
And he knows how to get us right back on track. You know, but that panic face, he knows my panic face now. I just look at him like, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" And
that kind of reflects our relationship writing over the years too. And like, you know, one thing about our backgrounds just being different, like John always wanted to be a writer. He grew up, you know, writing. He grew up applying to school to focus on writing, and like I did not. So like I could say unequivocally, if I just didn't exist, John would still definitely be a writer. If John didn't exist, I would not be a writer. And so there's just a little bit different evolution in our careers in writing, and it's always given me a bit of a, like, you know, I think we all have an imposter syndrome, you know, in everything we do. I think that's the, you know, kind of dirty secret everyone has, is no matter how much experience you have, everybody has, you know, some degree of that. And I think in the writer's room and in just writing in general, I'll always have that, because it wasn't, you know, my personal calling necessarily, but I think, you know, wanting to be a filmmaker and wanting to be a producer and wanting to be a director and doing all these other things, I think, you know, the writing is at the core of that. And I think, you know, our relationship, John's been, you know, very big ideas, lots of ideas. And I've kind of played the role of, like, you know, not that one, not that one, you know, that's the one, let's focus on that. And then, you know, moving forward, kind of really focused on structure and really focused on how do we, you know, keep the storyline interesting for not just 2 episodes, but 20, and kind of thinking more big picture. And that's been, you know, often my role in our partnership when we're actually in the writing zone.
yeah, I would say even before our partnership,
Yeah.
I remember, like, back Drew, you know, in his first life, like right out of college, was an investment banker. And I remember he was like the only one who would read, like, I'd write a script and he was like literally the only person who would read one. And so I'd send Drew my scripts. And I remember Drew reading a script and just breaking it down in this, like, I think you need to ask yourself why people go to the movie theaters. Like, do they go, you know, my sense is they go to have a big, you know, emotional experience. They go to laugh. They go to, like, have big emotions. Like, And it was, I was writing, the craziest, like, I wanted to be like Charlie Kaufman. I wanted to be the weirdest writer. And it was just one nonsensical thing after another. And Drew really, and I was like, oh yeah, I got to start putting myself more in that mindset. And I would say, like, throughout the years, like Drew tends to see the forest in a way. We like to joke that Drew has the newspaper, tomorrow's newspaper. He gets to read tomorrow's newspaper today, and he can kind of see things coming in a way like I get. Like, one example is Drew's like, you always want to break the entire episode based on the teaser you want to shoot, like do the teaser last. Don't do the teaser first. You know what I mean? And it's true. I get a teaser in mind and I'll bend over backwards. I'll burn everything to the ground just to like have this because I want to go shoot it. And Drew really has I don't know, he sees big picture in a way that I can sometimes get so caught in little things that I forget to zoom out. And I find that a really, I don't know, something like over and over, I'll find myself just like stuck and he'll know, what the thing to do. And I don't know, that's been a lifesaver just over and over.
I wrote a script once that was about, it was a comedy about, like a grounded comedy about a couple has just had a baby, and it's just sort of a funny slice of life of the first week of bringing that baby home and the grandparents descending to help, but not really being helpful. And I love this thing. It was so fun. I had just, of course, had a baby and put all this stuff in there. And Drew was like, I think probably new parents don't go to the movies. He's like, I think you're writing it for an audience that will never watch it. And so it will never get made.
God, that sounds so harsh. I know. You guys make it sound so harsh.
That was the headline of tomorrow's news was like, move on to the next script. Never going to happen. Well, spoiler alert. That's exactly right.
Maybe this is a book.
Well, Drew's full of good. He has that good, that cut through it lot. Like Drew's superpower phrase is that really necessary? Like when Drew lays that phrase on, I've seen people crumble under the weight of like, is that really necessary?
After working with you guys, after working with Drew, we've tried that. We've tried to use that phrase in our own work. We've taken that. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
We try to channel Drew all the time with that. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Necessary.
Sometimes people really need to justify whether something is necessary.
It's funny. It's sort of like asking people to examine what it is they're saying is such a valuable tool in general. Like we had a showrunner once and I don't advocate for this in general, but their tactic basically on notes calls was to say nothing. And it was wildly effective. You would like listen to an executive be like, so I'm wondering if we could maybe just find a little something more interesting for this character to do in this scene. And there'd be like nothing. And they're like, it could be something small. Like it doesn't have to be, if you wanted to do it, like, you know what, maybe not, maybe we don't even need to do it. And the person would just say nothing. And I was like, holy shit, this is working. I don't think it was like an enjoyable process for anybody, but it was like pretty effective. I was like, wow.
We found that too. We had a studio executive that just had this incredible ability to just say nothing and just look at you. And like, we found ourselves doing the exact same thing. We'd come in with like something we were pushing for and then end up just like totally negotiating against ourselves and unwinding everything just because of the silence was so intimidating. And
so funny.
It's interesting. The three of you work together. Andy and I just recently we've been developing a couple of projects with like another person, or there's another show that we are supervising a writer on her project, and there's three of us now in like discussing things and in a room, and it's actually nice to have a tiebreaker. We didn't expect it. We didn't know how it would change our dynamic to go from just the two of us to now like two plus another, a third, and it's been great to have a tiebreaker.
That's really cool.
That really is.
I don't know if you guys have found that, the three of you all working together now.
I'd say Drew and I, we always try to I think early on we had more pushing back and forth earlier, and as we've come up, I think we've both realized if Drew has a problem with something, lots of people are going to have a problem with it. And if I have a problem with something, lots of people are going to have and over time, I think it's become more okay, even if I don't see what Drew has a problem with, there's something to it. There's a third way. There's a third way. Like, it's never like it's my way or it's your way. It's always like, okay, there's a third way to do this. And I feel like being a duo starts you off in a place that's collaborative to begin with. And I feel like it's probably makes it much easier to go into studios, networks, and deal with notes and deal with other collaborators, because you're doing that even privately. You know what I mean? Like, whereas I think a lot of writers who don't have that show up and like, how dare you tell me, what to change? And I find like a lot of our job is just talking other people down, like, hey, there's always a way to make a good change, even with a bad note. Like, we'll find I don't know, a way to do this.
I think that's so true. Like like you talk about, like, I mean, I think writing, particularly in television, but any kind of screenwriting, is about problem solving, right? And I know there's the Tarantinos out there of the world who solve their own problems internally, and they come out with something like, this is it, it's perfect, it's done, and that can work for certain people. But generally, like, the most successful writers that I know and the most interesting writers that I know are the ones that are willing to be malleable and throw it all out and start over all the time, not like unnecessarily, but like, we all know when things are working 50% or 75% or 80%, and it's hard work. And it's prideful work. And so it can be really difficult to make that choice to change things. But the more malleable you can be and the more willing you can be to do that, I think the more success you are. And I think working with a partner inherently instills those values in you. Like, we always give this example in the room, like, where the problem you're always talking about in the room is like, how do we get into this bank vault? How are we going to get into this bank vault? And someone's like, what if we tunnel under it? And someone else is like, what if we steal someone else's ID? What if we crack the safe? What if we blow it up? Right? And the answer is always, what if it's not a bank? And the solution is to like go outside of the problem. And I think working with a partner is so valuable because it constantly making you problem solve internally in a way that I think then becomes very useful externally, whether it be in a writer's room or with executives or whatever else. You've already had to throw out shit and change it and fix it. And so you're less precious, I think, in some ways about those things when it gets to the outside world.
That's such a great example. I love that. I just want to mention real quick too with, Stacey, it's like, we've been working with Stacey forever. It's been, maybe more official on the last couple of TV shows where we're actually in the same room, but we've been, developing stuff with Stacey forever. And the trio really is super powerful. Like John and I, and I'm sure Andy and Lauren, you guys have some of this too, being a married couple. Like John and I grew up together, shared a room together, have, been joined at the hip our whole lives. So like our brains are almost like, 1.5 brains. And I know, John and Stacey are married, but like Stacey is like this completely different brain, this, capable of writing things that we aren't, that is just such a different perspective and a different type of talent that we're able to, as, showrunners and directors, that we're able to, that's really valuable to us. And I think, beyond the like official writing duos, I would say, one bit of advice I would have is like the stronger your writing tribe is, whether that be your partner or that be, just other good writers in your orbit that you're close to, can all have so much value in your career and all can be so helpful.
You guys have such similar taste. You really deep down like 99% of the same things. And like you're saying, my stuff is more outlier. I'm more, I've got like History of the World Part 1 baked into my DNA in a way that you guys do not. You know what I mean? It all somehow comes back to like, how about a Mel Brooks thing? Waka waka. But somebody brought this up earlier and I hadn't thought of it then, but I'll write something and my first round of notes is always from John and Drew. Before a producer sees it or a studio sees it or a network sees it, they see it. And to be honest, I get the greatest volume of notes from them. So the most notes come from John and Drew before anyone else has even seen it. And I will, I get very huffy about notes, very huffy and like, you want me to change, unless somebody gives me the note and comes up with a solution right then. And I love it. That's my favorite. When people are like, I feel like it gets a little boring then, but maybe if you had the character parachute in, or whatever, you go, yes, I'll do that. Thank you. But I get especially huffy if it's from one person giving the note, and I'll be sort of like, I mean, it's
Me.
usually John because
She
we're
means
married.
me.
So yeah.
I'm the one person.
Like hypothetically,
And the thing is, hypothetically,
one
say
person,
you're
this
making
guy.
breakfast. Say you're trying to get your kids out the door for school and someone's giving you a note. Say it's something like that. Then I will be like, let's see what Drew thinks. You know, and it's true that if Drew feels it too, it's like, okay, if both of them feel that way, all right, it's easier to take the note, and it's helpful because John and Drew are also so creative and imaginative. So unlike maybe an exec who might give you the note and not offer the solution. By the way, I find it a really sweet thing. Talk about imposter syndrome. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. I have so much less experience than all of you. But so far in my experience, I have found that a lot of executives really sweetly have a bit of imposter syndrome when they come up with ideas. So they'll be like, here's the note. It's a calibration, not a big thing. And here's the bad pitch. Just maybe one idea. It completely stinks and it's awful, but here it is. And then they'll say the idea and it's really good.
No, I agree, Stacey. But our experience, more often than not, is that executive notes are, again, our experience. I'm sure there's been, a lot of terrible notes people have gotten, but in our experience, have been rather good. And like, we look at, the final product of some of these seasons of TV and be like, you know what, that, we were really pushed hard to, for this plot point to not happen at the end of the pilot, but to happen at the end of episode 2. And that made all the difference in the world. And like, we just see so much of the
By
upside
gum, they were right.
of notes. Yeah, they
Yeah.
often, some of these executives are very, very bright.
Yeah, I have a whole theory on notes in the sense of like that there's I believe that most humans, not even just executives, can process a story and tell you what's not working about it. Because we understand stories as human beings. Like, I think that people like a good note in that sense can come from almost anyone. And executives obviously have lots of experience and are very smart and can also give great notes. I think the problem that arises with executives is almost always because they give notes not for themselves. Like if an executive is giving a note about what they believe about something and what they feel or what it's not working, it's almost always a real value in it, right? Even if the solution isn't great. I think a lot of times executives aren't great at pitching solutions, but sometimes they pitch great stuff. I think the problem extends when they're trying to give you notes off of what they think their boss or what they think the market or the studio or somebody wants. That's when notes become problematic to me, because they no longer become about making the project good. They become about making the project into something, a target they think they're trying to hit.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the notes go off the rails for me personally.
Andy, could you give an example of
such
that?
a great
'Cause that
point.
sounds right, but I'm trying to.
Sure. The main character needs to be more likable.
Yeah.
So many notes, or that we have to have like a huge flashy act out here because that's what all the CBS shows this year, they really want big action at the end of the thing, and then all you're writing to is an edict about like a conceptual edict that has nothing to do with your material. It only has to do with something that they're trying to check off. And I feel like those things don't go together very well.
Yeah.
You should have your main character save someone from a burning building, and then they're more likable, and you get your big flashy out. Boom,
right.
done. I solved it.
I gotta say, when Drew and I were, more in the movie space, when we were in the movie space, there was like, there'd be like, we'd be developing like 3 or 4 movies, and then a movie would come out, and and the execs would be like, "Oh, that movie came out. It had a dog in it. There's a dog in our script. That movie didn't work, so we write out the dog." And we'd be like, "Well, that doesn't. That's not the same.
Exactly.
It's a totally. Oh, there was kids in that movie, and nobody liked that movie. So kids are dead in movies now. Like nobody wants movies with kids in them. You know what I mean? Like it was like just taking the dumbest lessons from the data. You know what I mean? The data of one weekend, and but thankfully television has so much data you can't really extrapolate like something that stupid theoretically.
Theoretically.
Well, they can't make it good. They can't guarantee it's going to be good, but they can guarantee there's no dog in it. You know what I mean?
Totally. That's so true.
That's what they can control.
Andy and I, we hosted an event at the Writers Guild a few years ago now, where we did all teams. We had teams come and meet each other and did a panel with teams, and we interviewed different teams, and we asked them like, how do you work? Like, same questions you're asking, like how do you write together? What do you do to ensure like that the team is like in a good place emotionally? And people shared, right? Some people were like, oh, we go to couples counseling, like that's just something we do, even though they weren't a couple, like they were two just individuals writing together. Or someone was like, a married team was like, oh, well, we drive separately to work there and back because that's our time to kind of decompress or have a moment to ourselves. Like there were different tips in there. And it was so fun though, because it was like all these teams and you're like, I've never seen a team before. Cause usually shows will hire one team, right? So teams being teams was like so exciting. And like, you're kind of like, tell me all your secrets,
Yeah,
that's so
that's
cool.
awesome.
One of the things we should say on this podcast too, because like we had asked like teams like how to help each other out. And one of the teams got up and said, listen, you kind of fight to get paid separately, but on the off chance you lose that fight, you can then kind of go to your second tier fight, which is you get separate pension and health. And sometimes they will give on that. So even if they won't pay you
that
separately,
helps.
they will contribute to separate pension and health.
Yeah.
So they
For 10
were,
years, Andy got dental and Lauren got medical.
That's right.
And that's why he's got that
Perfect
stunning.
Yep. I can't walk, but I got a great smile.
I feel like if you're nice and you're likable, that's another bonus of, say, especially if you're married or if you're brothers. There's a feeling of like, well, they must be pretty, especially as you're building your reputation before people, know that you're known as good people. Well, you work together and you get along, so you must be pretty nice.
That's a good
I
point.
think that's so right. Like, if someone else can tolerate you every single day, in a
Exactly.
working relationship, then you must be, not that bad. And I think there's truth to that. And the point I was going to make, like, the downsides are there, and there's financial downsides, but there's an upside in just pure branding. I got to say, as a writing team, that I think is super powerful. Like, I can use Andy and Lauren, you guys as an example. Like, when we first got someone recommended you guys, like, oh, Gettens and Mackenzie, you guys got to meet with Gettens and Mackenzie. It was just like the moniker alone was like, who is this? Gettens and Mackenzie. They sound so interesting. And
it's like Simon
and I think us as
you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Except now that I know you're Lomac, I just want to call you Lomac all the time.
Yeah.
But sorry, Joe. I didn't mean it.
But we're brothers, so our kind of brothers moniker has been really, I think, helpful to us. Just kind of standing out of the crowd a little bit, and like there's another writing team that John and I discovered on just like a real small indie movie that they had written, and we're like, these guys are brilliant, and let's meet with them. And just the way they bounced off each other, and just a lunch meeting was just like, wow, these guys are nobody knows about these guys. This would be like our secret weapon if we need the perfect hire for the perfect thing. And then of course, a year later, we go back to try to hire them, and they're writing the next Marvel movie, So, but I think there's like a real branding value in being a team. And I think, when you just come across as a bit of a force of nature when you're two people, I think, compared to someone who's alone. And it's a pretty solitary career, and can be a pretty solitary career. And when you make it slightly less solitary, I think it makes the product better.
But it's funny that you say that, because Andy and I take turns on whose name comes first on the script. It's like what we've always done. We go back and forth on our spec scripts, and we go back and forth on our writing credits. And for the longest time, we were like, whose name is going to be known as first, right? And just for whatever reason, the name that Andy's script was on first got like that script got the most heat for us. And we became known as Gettens and Mackenzie. But I was like, God damn it!
It's got a ring to it. It does have a ring to it. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you guys should like do a mashup like Magettens. You know what I mean? Like something that.
So we're Shabowdle.
Yeah.
So my name's Shabosky and John's is Dowdle. And then our cat was Schlitz. And John did the editing with some other people on Poughkeepsie tapes. And then wasn't your editing assistant, you tried to put in Schlitz Shabowdle.
Schlitz Shabowdle, yeah.
And
Try to give our cat credit.
MGM did not approve. Did not
Didn't.
approve my
They
cat.
didn't.
I had to deal with the delivery of that movie to MGM, and it was like our first time even dealing with the studio, and we're delivering all the materials, and he dug through every contract, and like this guy was like the bane of my existence for a solid year. But then when he got to the end credits, he's like, "Who is this Schlitz Shabowdle?" That would be
The
John's
best.
cat.
The best. Yeah.
As the assistant editor. Yeah. He's like, Take it out. Yeah.
We're like the darkest horror movie. It's like the cat is like we were such a mom and pop organization. Let's jump into the rapid fire 4. We ask 4 questions every week. This week is Andy. What is the first television show you truly loved and why?
As a writer, was West Wing. I remember watching that show and for the first time being like, I wish I'd written that. And that was like a big moment. I always wanted to be a writer, and that was one of the first times that television felt like something that I would really want to do.
I love that.
Such a good show. John and I fell asleep in front of that DVD so many times on the couch. And we, if anyone remembers DVDs, and the W.G. Snuffy Walden score, it would have been playing for like an hour, and we would have been asleep because, it's the DVD menu, and we wake up like, what? So that score haunts my dreams.
Very inspiring dreams.
Yeah, so, okay, Stacey.
What is your favorite part of the job?
This is maybe lame, but I really love the writing part. I like sitting down and actually writing. That's my favorite part.
I think you might be the only writer in history who feels that way.
I know.
That's what I was going to say. I find the writing part of it just excruciating and awful, and I feel like just beside myself anytime I actually have to do it. And Andy would literally sit at the keyboard smiling and kind of like, loving it.
I love it.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. I love it. Okay. What is the part of the job that costs you something?
I think anytime you do something that you love, you end up having to give up a bunch of things you like because it consumes you. And I think that's true of this career as well. I have lots of friends, I'm sure you guys do too, where they're like, I'm a lawyer and I check out at 5 and I went to Turks and Caicos this weekend and I belong to a country club or whatever. Those all sound expensive, but that's not what I mean. I just mean that like they work to live. They work to live, and we live to work because we love what we do, and there's a cost to that in terms of the amount of time you have to do other things.
Yeah,
great
that is
answer.
very true.
If you had a time machine, what one piece of advice would you give yourself when you were starting your career?
I would give myself 2 tangential pieces of advice, which would be to decide what you want to do as soon as you can and run at that as hard as you can. I spent a lot of time as like everyone does in your 20s trying to just create art and waiting for someone to come find me. And that was not the most effective use of my resources or time. And the second piece of advice someone else gave to me, which I think is like one of the best pieces of advice, is keep your overhead low because this career takes time. And if you start to incur debt or just demands of your finances, you will make choices based on that instead of choices based on where you want to go and what you want to do. And it's inevitable you're going to have to do that to some degree as you get older, but the more you can mitigate it, the better choices you'll make and the more you'll free yourself up to actually pursue the things you love.
It's a great piece of advice.
Such excellent advice. And that's, not to pat our own backs, but that's one thing I think we learned or realized early in our career is keep the overhead low.
I know you guys are blowing all that money on underwear.
Yeah, exactly. iPhone and underwear. We knew how to keep the overhead low. And I got to say, when you learn how to keep your overhead low as a young person, it carries, through to your adulthood. And like, I find myself like unable to expand my overhead because I love it so low. You really get used to that.
Well, Lauren and Andy, thank you both so much for jumping in. It's just such a pleasure talking with you, and you're both so interesting. So thank you for all of this.
Yes,
of course.
Really appreciate it, guys.
It was so fun. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, cool. All right, see you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.